And we are back again for another episode of Behind the Movement. And I am accompanied by Mariam Hakobyan, who is the founder and the CEO of Softr, a no-code building platform, which recently got #1 on Product Hunt. Mariam has a technical background and a background in entrepreneurship. She is now one of the sort of leading women in the no-code movement. Mariam, thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited for this chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Christian, for inviting. Really pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no, so let's jump straight into it. We've been talking in the back end. I want to talk about some of the things we talked about there. But let's start off by sort of can you tell people what Softr is all about? Like, what is the main aim of the platform, and what can you build?
Yeah, sure. Softr is the easiest no-code platform to build beautifully responsive websites and web apps without writing code and using building blocks. We truly believe that the no-code tools can be simple, so they don't require any tech background. At the moment, there's lots of tools in the market. However, we believe some of them are either simplistic and some of them are really complex that still require a technical background or understanding technical concepts. So we really aim for Softr to be the easiest platform where you can really easily and intuitively build web apps and websites, however, still powerful functionality.
That is super exciting. Yeah, I think that this is like really one of the topics that's interesting, right? Some of the no-code tools out there have very deep functionalities, but as we discussed on the back end, like some of them do require like understanding certain technical concepts. You have sort of started building on certain platforms, and you're a developer, and you felt like some of them were less intuitive than that you would like. Would you say that that's like one of the motivations that got you to be like, hey, you know what, I'm going to build one myself?
Well, partially, I would say. But when I started really working on Softr, I wasn't really in the no-code space. I mean, I didn't even know no-code is a thing. So it basically started with a frustration, really, because my co-founder and I, both of us, have been really building software products for the last 13 years ourselves. And we have just seen there is so much repetition in the whole process. And every company keeps reinventing the wheel, building another like marketplace, another dating app, or all of the functionalities, 70% of the functionalities were the same. And things like authentication, payment, messaging, and every company kept hiring a team of engineers to just build payments, right? Do these integrations, and it sounded insane. On the other hand, we have been both hiring for 5 years for our team's software engineers, and we just know, like firsthand, we have seen the scarcity of engineering talent. And even if you have talent, it's really expensive and long to build something. So we just thought, why not to have a platform where you have all of these repetitive things provided as building blocks out of the box from the platform, and then companies build on top of that only what's specific to their business. Yeah, that's basically how we started Softr. And then when I really just started to get to know all the tools out there after my research in the no-code space.
I love that. No, that's so cool, because you're really tackling two things. It sounds like basically basically when open source came out, right? When you could use other people's source code to basically start and reuse that in your building. I think that was the first step towards this, but it's still, as you mentioned, it's basically for developers, right? And so this idea that no code is exactly that, just for non-technical people. I think that's a really good way to illustrate it, and I think that that's something that people can really understand. What you mentioned about like reusing, like people building the same things. I always joke that like probably 60% of the teams at companies like probably things like Uber or Instagram, they're all like working on the same stuff. Airbnb. They're literally rebuilding things that have been built thousands of times over and over and over again. And so there's a lot of this very talented pool of developers who are not being used at their optimal level, right? Who are being asked to create a very basic Facebook authentication, or that who are building a payments system. So it's true that it doesn't make sense anymore. So where do you see, like, having talked about that, like, where do you see that going? Because a lot of people in the space are kind of like, oh, we don't like no code because like developers are like, think no code is all about destroying their life, and about taking their jobs. So do you think that there's going to be a day where coding is not really as relevant? Where do you think the shift is going?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I don't think coding is going to be non-relevant at some point, because we do still need engineers to build these complex tools, right? Also, I think what's going to become irrelevant is just the fact that there is so much like competition, and lots of engineers are just building these simple parts, like still HTML, CSS, and all of the basic like components which can be already given out of the box. Like you said, Facebook authentication is something you just can plug in and it's there. So engineers will start basically working on more complex and more difficult problems, which are very specific also to the business. So a lot of businesses have their own concepts, their own specifics, and that is what they can spend time, which is also something that brings value to the business, right? I think another payment layer, it's not what makes the business more successful or more And well, on the other hand, I think just the no code itself is really a natural step of evolutions of software engineering, because it's just another layer of abstraction. Like several years ago, probably around like 20 years ago or so, people wrote code to edit a text, right? And then Windows appeared, and then people just click. Like similarly, even now, all the engineers, like I'm an engineer myself, I have been building stuff, and I'm not using assembler anymore, right? We still use all of these like abstractions already. And we use things like libraries, frameworks, and programming languages themselves are abstractions. And I think this is just what this enables engineers to write programs on more high level, on more high level. Then similarly, no code is going to enable more people who are non-engineers building applications themselves.
Yeah. I also want to emphasize that it's a great tool for developers to learn. It's like, hey, if you can build 70% of it in a weekend and then spend your time working on those more difficult tasks, like, isn't that going to be a better way to bring your product to market than to custom code all these things that have been written over and over again?
Yeah, so, and I tell you, like really strong engineers, most of the time they're unhappy working on this on the same functionality over and over. They just they just do it because you have to have this functionality.
No, I love that, because that's definitely very inclusive. It's saying like, hey, and honestly, like a lot of great no coders are coders. Like, that's the other thing. It's like, this is not exclusive. This is not about saying like, this is going to finish code. Like, there's code behind all of this. It's just about saying like, now there are better ways to build software. And I say that as generalization because it is generalization in the sense that you can build most kinds of software leveraging no-code tools. But there's always going to be cutting edge cases, right? When it's the first time that something's being built, like, we're seeing limitations in no-code when it comes to certain cutting edge use cases, right? Like, we talk about blockchain, that hasn't been figured out yet with no-code. AI and machine learning, that's just starting right now. Like, we were talking offline about some integrations that allow you to build AI models without writing any code, and then bring those into your no-code stack as well. So we're moving in that direction. Do you have any predictions of where what this whole industry will look like in 5 years? Like, what are some of your predictions when it comes to that? And if you don't have any, like, that's fine as well. I'm kind of putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, it's just a prediction and hypothesis, right? But it might come true or not. But well, the reason I'm working on Softr obviously is because I do believe that the no-code is future. But my belief is that, as I said, it's another layer of abstraction, and I do believe that what is gonna happen is, like, similarly, maybe just bringing a comparison. Like 5 years ago, when there was just the photo camera and there was no iPhone, like, or 10 years ago when there were not phones and the cameras, like people to take photos, they had to be specialized and they had to have these gadgets, right? And nowadays, everyone is just taking photos, really nice, beautiful photos, quality photos with their iPhones, right? So similarly, like we imagine for Softr to be kind of the iPhone, and previously the software engineering is kind of like the big photo camera, and Softr is more of the iPhone, which then allows a lot more people from broader audience and from completely non-technical backgrounds be able to build applications, which in turn implies that a lot more people can build their own businesses. It doesn't have to be venture-backed businesses necessarily, because it's just like 1% of all the startups, but people are going to be able to support themselves, build their startups, like have their own lives, and just sustain themselves with the revenue they generate. And even many people who are working full-time nowadays, like most of the no-code enthusiasts and people in the space, I think they are still, most of them are working full-time, but they do have some businesses running on the side, right?
Yeah. I love that. I love what you just mentioned, actually. And you can almost draw the comparison with like photographers and when Instagram, before Instagram and after Instagram. It's like before Instagram, you had to be a photographer if you wanted to be really talented. And after Instagram, it was kind of like, well, if you know, that it was putting the tools of what some photographers have in the hands of more people.
Exactly.
And so, yeah. And listen, there are still some terrible Instagrammers out there, like, who don't know how to take pictures even with the filters, but I think putting those tools in the hands of people and then saying like, and it's not, you know, it's not like it's completely killed the photography market. Like good photographers will always have a job, but they're working on the more complex stuff, right? They're now focusing on advertising. They're focusing on places that can't be replaced with certain things. And I think there's an interesting comparison there. Although it's not completely, you can't compare it perfectly. Oh, actually, we just got a comment in from Sasha, nice, who's talking about how we're both really helping the no-code movement. Sasha, we appreciate it. So myself and Miriam will actually be participating in a conference called the Second Digital Revolution. We'll be panelists, so we'll be talking about no-code. We'll be talking about Softr, and that will be taking place in November, the main event. There's going to be a couple events leading up to it. Thanks, Sasha, for sort of jumping in here and sending a little shout out. So let's move on. You got #1 in Product Hunt. So #1 product of the day. For those of you who don't know what Product Hunt is, essentially it is a platform which announces the latest releases of new products. So there's a really big community of no-code tools that have been coming out lately, and a shout out to them for doing such a great job. But becoming #1 of the day is a very challenging thing because they have an algorithm which works on upvotes. And Mariam, when she did her launch for Softr, she was able to climb the entire ladder and make it to #1 for the day. So Mariam, could you give us a couple of tips, or maybe tell us how that happened, and maybe like some of the strategies you might have used to be able to make that a reality?
Yeah, magic.
Perfect. No other explanation needed. Next question.
Yeah, actually, someone the other day asked me if it was just luck to get to #1 or planned launch. And I do believe that there is always luck in it. You have to always also have a bit of luck there. But I think success is not just a serendipity, right? It's rather a result of like well-planned steps and activities. And yeah, definitely we did plan our launch. And like I'm gonna actually write an article and publish soon to go through the steps we took for our launch. But like the short overview would be, first, build an audience. We created an upcoming page in Product Hunt itself long before launch, and we kind of collected all the people who were interested to know when our product launches, and launch minimum lovable product instead of minimum viable product. That's something, you know, how many, like I can't emphasize how much it is repeated that you have to really put something out in the market very quickly, which might be just even buggy, etc. But I think nowadays, which I agree in many cases that makes sense, but I think especially if you are in a market where there is already competitors, there's already lots of tools that fulfill what you are doing, because, let's be honest, there is no really a problem that is completely unsolved nowadays, right? There's possibly already several other solutions to that. So I think the bar to new launched products is really, really high. And your product needs to be unique in some ways and capture people's mind, whether it's the experience of using it, whether it's the simplicity, differentiating features, whatever that is, there has to be something special. And I think that's why we have spent quite some time on just building the product, even though, we have been talking to the customers on the way, but we have been really making sure that we have at least some of the basics and some of the key parts in it already been when launching. Another thing would be contribute first. One thing I noted that is whenever you want some support from communities or you're announcing about your launch, your success is directly correlated to your activity and how useful you have been to the community. And if you have been really giving first and really engaging actively, then definitely people are very open and willing to support you.
That's amazing.
Launch day is definitely something that you can choose as a strategy. Of course, I think many people who know Product Hunt probably know that there are some days which are very competitive and there is more traffic, and there is some other days which are not so competitive, but there is less traffic as well. We chose to launch on the competitive day because we also were eager to get more exposure, and it worked for us, but it's just different strategies you could choose. And I think one important thing as well, which is to have a special offer discount for the Product Hunt community, because the Product Hunt community loves offers on the launch day. Well, who doesn't? We gave away 30% yearly discount for our product, which really made wonders because lots of people kind of already start using it from that day on. And there's many other smaller things which I'll be writing up in the article and share with the community hopefully soon.
I love that. Yeah. And make sure to ping me. I will reshare it on LinkedIn for all the folks who are watching and those who are not. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think that's, I'm actually a contrarian when it comes to this. I'm like, forget the launch, stop focusing on the launch. The launch doesn't matter. What matters is actually building a community, and what matters is actually building a set of customers who really love your product and who will endorse it and who, but if there is a launch that I do believe in, it is the Product Hunt launch, because I think one of the things you get more than even just this day where you feel like, you're either going to succeed or fail on that day. And it's not the case, right? It's like, this is going to be an ongoing battle. But I think one of the things you do get is just a huge amount of feedback that can help you in the process, and connections, and get people to be relatively excited. But I definitely don't encourage early stage founders to kind of create an event and spend 300,000 people, $300,000 with 10,000 people from the media and the this and the that. It's like people, you look at companies who have launched 5 times, like Airbnb, and the only reason they did that was so that they could continually build this community. And yeah, one day it took off, but it's not like there was one launch and it was this is it, we are successful now. It's it's and I think a lot of people they like that thought. So oh, I'm gonna work, and then I'm gonna launch, and as soon as I launch, it's no, as soon as you launch is the beginning of your problems.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's super exciting to see. So I mean, listen, let's move a little bit out now and talk about you're an entrepreneur building this company. You're a female. You're starting off in this whole adventure, and so it's a frightening experience. It's a exciting experience. Some days are high, some days are low. Are there some things that you've learned from this startup that you think would be valuable for founders out there to hear first-handedly?
Yeah, definitely. There are lots of things. Probably some of the important things are when you are especially working as an engineer, or really heads down working on your specific problem in product or tech, you really think that's the end. You have the product and everything else is simple. And when you are working on it as a founder, when you have to tackle all the other perspectives like sales, marketing, I don't know, all of the other aspects of the business, you just realize then how little the whole engineering, not engineering, but just the product itself plays in the whole success of the company.
Yeah.
Because product is just a product. As an engineer, you can always build a product, put it there, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna have people wanting what you have built, right? And yeah, there is a lot of the other parts of the business which I really learned that you have to really engage, you have to really start doing all of that, because that's what in the end makes your business successful. Yeah,
I love that. I think that's spot on. That's like you're preaching to the choir here, because we're all about the fact that no code is good and it's amazing and we love it. The name of our company is We Are No Code. But at the same time, what we teach is really about becoming a fully empowered entrepreneur. And that takes a lot of different skills. And so that's why, like, and what you mentioned is a typical thing of like when you're working in a larger company and you're in charge of developing products, essentially, because as soon as it's done, you just give it to the marketing team or give it to the sales team. You're like, okay, now you go and do the hard.
You complain why people can't sell it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, and I think that that's very different when you're just a small team with you know, a few resources early on, and you're having to tackle all these different things and learn all these new skills. And I think that, yeah, it's important for people to understand that although no code is going to completely change the way that we build software, and I believe entrepreneurship as well, probably also in the workforce, but I think that it's not enough in and of itself, basically, that there are a lot of other aspects around the technology, and some of the biggest mistakes I see with regard to startups is like, I have an idea, I need to build my idea, and it's like, no, you have a lot of other steps going on before and even after you've built that product that people actually need and want and are willing to pay for. There's you know, how do you bring that to market? How do you market that? How do you people forget, everyone's in the startup scene is very focused on product market fit, but product channel fit as well. Is like, once you figured out the product market fit, it's like testing out all these different acquisition strategies and channels, and you know, really looking at the cost of acquisition, the lifetime value of a customer, understanding the relationship between both of those, understanding the sort of these different channels that you, at first, they're literally just assumptions. Like, I think that this is going to be a good strategy to get people, but then you might make some experiments and realize that that's not the case. So, you know, like, launch is the first step, and then it's really about no, but it's so cool. I mean, I think
there's a lot of hustle
yes.
in, yeah, really making something successful, making something out of nothing, really.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I think that you're doing a really good job with regard to that, because, like, I mean, you're catching people's attention, you're putting a good intention out there, you've provided free resources to a lot of people in the community. I think that these are all great ways to basically, you know, it's like give but give like genuinely, you know, give genuinely, and good things happen coming back. I know this is going to sound a little bit like kumbaya, let's sing Bob Marley at a fire camp, but I do believe that that's actually the way that the human psyche works, and so it applies directly towards sales and marketing. Okay, so let's talk about, are there any things that you would recommend people don't do? Like, did you make any mistakes where you're like, oh my God, if only had known this one thing? I know that I've had a lot of those things in my career as an entrepreneur, like things I'm like, oh my God, if I had only known, you know, and you find out maybe like 6 months later, and you're like, oh, I would have done things differently. Any advice with regard to that?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, there have been, again, many, but I guess probably the most important, again, to really make sure you are working on an important problem and really making sure it's the right thing to spend time on, is talking to customers early on. We did start to talk to customers, but like, we started from completely broad audience. We talked to like lots of different people, and then we kept building. And I think we have spent some time closed, kind of heads down building, and like, it's still something to also figure out while we go, right? Who are your really like target customers, who are the best customers that you can acquire. And it requires a lot of work and lots of talking to customers. So as early you do, as much you do, then it's going to be much more beneficial for you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned it very clearly there. It was like, it's basically like when you start talking to a diverse number of people, you get this idea of, okay, this is generally what I have to build. But then understanding what's the customer that's going to be the easiest to acquire, and what's the customer I'm driving the most value? What's the customer that's going to have maybe the shortest sort of sales cycle as well? These are all important questions in determining a very specific section, right? And so everyone wants to have the billion-dollar company, right? But the way that you build that at first is really finding that very first small niche, addressing that very specifically, and as you grow, you can add niches to it and get to more and more edge cases.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think in the first place, the most important thing is to really focus on building something for people who really, really need it, who are already like feeling the pain, and your product, that's where, if you have an MVP, that probably would work. If you're working on a really problem that people have, then they will buy it, even if it's a bit shitty or even if it's too basic.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's actually funny because in the no-code space, I feel like the people who have the most pain are actually people who are not first-time founders. They're people who have actually tried to, have gone through the process of trying to build something themselves and then have realized like, oh my God, developers are so expensive. Oh my God, it takes so long to find a perfect co-founder. Or basically realizing, oh my God, if I overseas and it's cheaper, then the code that comes back is terrible. So, and I think that it's like, those are the people that understand they have the problem.
Right.
And oftentimes it's like, choosing to go after people who are in that category might be more effective than choosing people who don't know what they don't know yet,
Exactly.
And some people do, right? You do get people who understand there's a lot that they don't understand, but as humans, I would say we're not the best at learning from other people's mistakes. We've proven that in history as well, over and over and over again. But yeah, no, that's a very interesting topic. So, okay, let me ask you this. What do you think, where do you think there's a gap happening in this no-code space at the moment? There's a lot of different players doing different things. Like, what are some of the gaps you see? What do you see some of the things that are still not there yet? And that you'd like to see them in that direction, or that you're taking Softr in that direction potentially?
Yeah, I think it's mainly two things, really. First is the awareness, especially where we are based in Germany. I have been talking to so many people who are almost not aware that that you can build a web app without really writing code, and they just don't believe it. And that's a bit crazy, but yeah, I think there's a lot of work to do from the tool, from the platforms, and also from the communities like yours, and from these kind of companies where you're really moving the whole no code movement forward. And the other thing I think is really what we are not seeing yet, even though there are lots of tools in the market. Still, some tools are really simple, as I mentioned in the beginning, and some are really complex. And we have had so many people coming to us from some of the other tools mentioning that it's just too hard, it's too difficult to learn, and I just give up. I cannot, not because they do not want to, but just because like people, why do people give up learning to code? Because it's just hard, it's tedious, right? It requires a lot of effort, commitment, etc. It's really hard as well. If you have a tool which is really difficult, I think that's also becoming a big issue. And then to me, it just loses the whole point of no code tool, right? Then when it's a no code tool, I do assume that it should be simple and it should not require any code or understanding of code. So that's where we hopefully also we will be able to fill the gap with Softr, where we imagine for Softr to be really, really, really easy to use. However, also be able to build powerful functionality.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's spot on. That really is. Like those are the two things we're talking about. Learning curve and intuitiveness to building that doesn't require technical skills, and then also this idea of like deep functionalities. Because right now we are seeing a little bit of both sides, right? Either it's a little bit too complex, but then you have deep functionalities, or it's a little too simple and the functionalities are relatively limited. So it'll be interesting, to see how that gap sort of bridges. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. And as you mentioned, that there's such a low awareness level around no code that it's actually a blue ocean opportunity for anyone who's in the no code space building a platform. I don't think that there needs to be a fight around market shares until a huge number of people around the globe know that these tool sets and these capabilities are actually out there. So there's a bigger fight to fight together than separately with regard to the no-code communities, the no-code platforms, and anyone who's looking to get involved.
Yeah, I think that's the right mindset to go about it. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So where can people actually find you if they want to reach out, if they want to learn a little bit more about Softr?
Well, they definitely can reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and also on our website, which is softr.io.
Very cool. And so the last question before we separate here is, so what is the influence that you want to have? I guess potentially, so you could answer that from within this space or just in general, like in life.
Yeah. Let me think. That's a really difficult question.
Very loaded question.
Well, I'll answer it from the software perspective. Well, ideally, like the influence, I think that the best influence would be for these no-code tools in general to have is to really enable, especially with the newer generation who are really tech savvy. All of the new generation who are coming up, they already know how to use these digital tools, etc. But what they don't know yet, what it still isn't the case, is that lots of people are still having a hard time getting into entrepreneurship, really starting their own businesses. What I do believe is no-code tools is going to have in the future and really influence also with Softr is to really enable more people and broader audience to really build their own businesses, whether it's their side projects or just their lifestyle businesses, to be able to completely be independent and not necessarily rely on their full-time job.
I love that. And I think that it's a perfect context right now, right? With everything that's going on in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, self-reliance. Well, Mariam, thank you so much for joining us today. It was awesome chatting with you. I look forward to participating with you in the conference that's coming up. And you have an awesome day. Thank you for everyone who's watching. Have a great day. And yeah, let's stay super active and keep people excited about no code.
Yeah, and thanks a lot, Christian, for the invite. It was a pleasure to chat. And yeah, let's keep up and let's keep in touch, and also looking forward to joining the panel together.
Yes, and thank you for being another badass woman in no code. You're really representing a population. I want way more. I want every little girl out there to be like, I want to build a company with no code. You know, that would be awesome. Okay, Mariam, take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.